Terrillian, Chapter 5, Terrillian's Curse. Terrillian went out into the galaxy, consuming the worlds and stars of Craith's creation with a seemingly unquenchable thirst like that of a black hole. This galaxy, once lovingly wrought to be the encompassing cradle for the world of Terrillian, was now just a buffet for the cursed devourer. And as the years passed, her insatiable greed and wrath withered her might and beauty to that of a desiccated corpse. All the more in endless hunger, she consumed world after world, star after star, but each seemingly sated her hunger less and less. She grew ashamed of her malformity, and in shame she slithered away into the darkness, clutching at passing fragments of the world she had ravaged, and pulling them into herself, and in loathing spite, she stripped away all that remained of her from Craith's design and compressed that stone and iron into her new self. But she was no skilled craftsman, and her once aspired after form and power was now like curdled milk. She was now perverse and distorted, a sickly mirror of what once was. In time, with her wit once again gathered, she saw the power she once thought limitless was wand, and she was afraid. She was never to have stood alone, independent from Craith. He was to be her sustainer, both of power and beauty. But she was blinded by her own desire, and could not come to terms with that fact that apart from Craith, his power, now hers, wasn't infinite. So she reasoned to herself that she must seize the rest of him to possess all of his powers. And that realization enraged her. She did not want, even in action, to admit that she was not his equal. So then in roiling rage, she returned to her namesake, the jewel and the crown of Craith's creation, to reap what she had not sown. Little did Terrillian know that in her years of absence, a once mourning planet seemingly dealt a death blow had mended. The Darthmar ruling the planet and now carrying on Craith's will, as interpreted by Calf, the planet now thrived as it had always been intended to. Calf and his brothers had created a strong empire that had spread out and conquered the known world. The legions that had led to the years of ash and eventual rebirth were long behind them. There was a mutual satisfaction between the children of Craith and the natural inhabitants of Terrillian, as the Darthmar had proven themselves to be deft leaders, ever taking the long view, and as a result they had become ever more entrenched in the history of their father's planet. Now, for the first time since her disdainful discarding of her namesake, Terrillian was forced to slink back from the dark edge and approach the world. And as she drew closer, she felt that ever-present, insatiable pang ease, and she salivated in anticipation of completing herself. Craith's remained pulled at her very core like a lodestone. She gleefully imagined ripping the world asunder as she plundered his remains from the dead world. But as its form grew clear, she did not see a dead husk of a world, but a living one and thriving. Where she thought to see the gravestone of Craith and the marker of her great victory, there was no sign that she had ever been. And what infuriated her all the more was that it was not the bones of Craith that she had sensed, but his very much alive and thriving offspring. Rage rolled up within her at this injustice, and she gathered her strength to strike a devastating blow against the world, to kill Craith's children and to seize the rest of his power for herself. But Calf knew with an assuredness of a foretold truth that one day Terrillian would return, and he had planned for it. As she sensed them, he called together his brothers, and they stood awaiting her. And as her first blow came, they reached out and slapped away her rapacious hand. Briefly shocked at the denial of her will, she flew into a mad rage and lashed out with indiscriminate savagery. Each and every assault was turned aside without even scratching the world, and she did not set foot upon the world. She felt her power quickly drain. Only then did she know the curse of Crave, and how this lustrous gem would remain out of her reach as long as the blood of Crave remained on the world to stand against her. Seething with spite at being denied her right, she slunk away back into the dark to plan her revenge. Welcome to the Terrillian podcast, where we talk about this magnificent world of Terrillian, created by Ian, who joins us today as a co-host, to talk about Chapter 5, Terrillian's Curse.
That's me, I'm Ian.
Our other co-host is Chris, our media manager and music producer, whose music you can hear playing in the background.
Sweet, thanks.
And Marina, the producer, which is a fancy way to say that she keeps us all on track because she's the other half of all of our brains.
Hey.
And finally, I am Beard, the resident book nerd, who loves all things sci-fi and fantasy. That was a beefy chapter.
Yes, sir.
That was a long one.
Yeah, that was good, though. I appreciate every sentence of that one.
I did too, and all my multiple retakes of reading that.
We got through it, though. But, all right, so Ian, first question about the reading, right? As we think about it, as we reflect on it, what was the visual inspiration for her consuming worlds and stars?
Well, the way I have her set up is she was a created being, and she was supposed to be someone who relied on Kraith. So basically, you're talking about something that requires, kind of like something without a battery. She took out Kraith. She essentially took out her battery. So now has nothing to charge her up, and she's trying to maintain this godlike status. So the only thing that can charge her up is everything else around her, everything that Kraith made.
Stuff that has like a touch of him within it.
Yeah.
Now, did you ever read Marvel comics at any point?
No, but I like the pictures in them. I didn't read them, but I would see pictures of their covers, oh, that's cool, and then I put it right back.
No, because it's super interesting. Because as I'm reading that, she's consuming the planets and the stars, I can't help but think of a character by the name of Galactus, who was a. Did you ever see that old Fantastic Four movie from, was it 05, 06?
It was the really, really cheesy one, right?
Yeah, super cheesy. A terrible depiction of Galactus, but the idea of this powerful being would go from world to world to consume the world to feed itself, but it's never really enough. And that's the picture I get of Terrillian when reading that. Is just of Galactus, this mega threat.
Is this battery concept? Is this a metaphor for anything? Does it go a little bit deeper? Obviously she's his creation, but he's doing everything for her, right? He loves her. Is this he's giving her love? Is this any kind of metaphor for that?
Well, it was supposed to be he made everything to show her how much he cared, and building the planet Terrillian was that final thing where he was this is how much I love you. Let me show you through labor. Let me produce Ultimate gift. And so it was never supposed to be, he never considered the idea of her wanting separation from him as the option. So she was never made to be separate from him. Being
okay.
separate from him essentially became like a vacuum, because then she started reaching out for anything that could help fill that void, regardless of whether or not she wanted Kraith. She basically made herself this void where she needed him.
Could she ever perish by not eating or consuming? Or was she just like wither and wither and wither and just become weaker and weaker, just not die?
Yeah, kind of like a husk at the end of it.
Right.
She would just slowly kind of, like, just, I guess you say, get thinner and thinner and more emaciated, into the point where she's just this, doesn't really know who she is or what she is. She's just kind of floating in existence, to just kind of exist in that state of absolute emptiness.
Okay. Well, and so you and Marina are the ones who do the initial writing of the chapter, and then I come back through and like I reword it and make it kind of flowery and to my own detriment, eloquent. Yeah, to my own detriment sometimes,
Add
because
a
I'm
book
trying
nerd, a little spice
to
to it.
book nerd spice. But I can't help but like as I am like rewriting it to make it just sound more flowery, I can't help but think about the psychology of Terrillian. Like what's behind, like what is pushing her. Like we know what is pushing her, but like, why does it enrage her that she is not Kraith's equal?
Pride.
It's just straight up pride.
It is the pride of the fact that she is not number one. She is not,
And will never be number one.
never can be.
Yeah, no matter what she does.
So she's always aspiring to be this god. And the fact that she can never attain it is maddening, for lack of a better word. So she's in this constant state of trying to achieve at something that she can't. She just can never get there. No matter how many planets she consumes, she's never going to be on par with Kraith.
Why does she not stop? Why does she not try to think it through, or just come to the realization like it's a never-ending, constant pursuit of power that she's never going to have enough?
She's blinded by the rage, which is fueled by her pride.
Okay.
So it's this constant state where she's kind of in this spiraling fashion where she's just reaching out, lashing out at anything and everything. And in her mind, her end goal would be like, if she had her dream scenario, she'd be perfectly sufficient on her own, where she could erase everything Kraith did, surpass him in every way, and create her own worlds, her own planets and everything like that. But she
That'd be
can't
bigger
even,
than Terrillian.
bigger than Terrillian, but she can't even maintain herself, let alone another planet.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's right.
So she's constantly in this state where she's trying to maintain herself and try to build herself up, but she can never get there to the point where she can actually start, building to the point where Kraith did.
Was there a this is an off script question, but I'm just thinking here.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a inspiration within your life for Terrillian, or was there just like something you saw and it just made sense?
I think
what was the birth
Terrillian.
of the character?
I think Terrillian was honestly kind of sillily, but it was almost a reflection of my need for recognition for my game.
Okay.
Constantly like trying to create more and more art to like achieve this level of like approval from my peers and from other people. Be like, see, like it's something. There's something here. So like I would constantly be reaching out. Hopefully my story doesn't end the same way hers does, but it was kind of fueled by that idea of just straight, like a desire for an approval, a desire to be in control of something.
Okay. I guess moving on then. Will we get a closer look at the Darthmar Society, the governance, and how it was set up? Have you thought that through?
So we will get kind of in the historical sense of what we're discussing here. Yes, there is. We're going to go over bits and pieces of that. But from the game, which is what this is all intended to kind of be fuel for, your character gets to kind of do that journey on their own. They get to kind of go through these ruins, and there will be reason why there are ruins later on, but they'll get to go through all these old manuscripts and society, and they get to kind of piece that together. So it's kind of like a breadcrumb trail to lead you to the real truth of Terrillian's history, which is kind of what we're going over here.
And when you say ruins, you mean ruins of the Darthmar Empire.
Yes, correct.
Ooh, interesting. Which I guess, what last week we had, there's only like 9 left by the time the game starts.
Yeah, there's not many surviving at that point.
Do you get to learn more about how they kind of dwindle down in numbers? Do you get more history of what? Are we going to learn more about that history of why they keep dwindling down?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're going to get very much so deep into that, because that kind of pulls into Terrillian and her story, and what she does is kind of her reaction to being swatted away by the Darthmar, by Calf and his brothers. Like, she starts to piece together a way to kind of get around that and try to take them out.
Okay.
So really, we'll get into that in the next couple chapters.
It seems like it's still related to the rage, always trying to find a way.
Trying to find a way to get back on top.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's apt that you bring up swatting away, because that was actually a thought I had. It's like, how did they manage to swat away her assault? Or is it just something innate within them? Because it said that Calf had a plan. How did they manage to fend her off?
So she's coming down as this all-powerful being, but she's still quite weak, especially comparatively from when she struck Crate down to the point where she returns to Terrillian. At this point, she's in kind of, not in a, I would say, a dire sense of hunger, but she's hungry. And she's definitely not nearly as strong as she was. So going against, Calf and his brothers, who were essentially the rebirth of Kraith collectively, Calf being the strongest of them, they were able to kind of fend her off, not in a direct sense, like, she reached out to try to take the planet, but I've always kind of imagined it in the sense of the Dragon Ball Z kind of a way where you see like a blast coming in, they're able to like reflect it back in a way.
Okay.
Like that's kind of how I saw it. I didn't see it as like a direct thing where she would be like trying to actually get into she's trying to like land on the planet to start consuming it, but there being there, she can't get to it. It was kind of one of those things I wasn't sure how I would play that out as far as writing it, because it was something that was supposed to be left skewed.
Right.
Because
especially because this is lore, this is history,
deep history,
and not necessarily something that would be, by the time the game starts, like we play the game, this is thousands and thousands of years in the past. So it doesn't have to be this is exactly how this worked, because no one's alive is going to know.
And leaving that kind of as a mystery does kind of, I guess you can say, it intrigues a lot of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The mystery is always something within stories that grabs me. There's this unexplainable aspect that everybody's aware of or not aware of, and it's there. And I'm always, as I'm reading stories, like, I want to know. I want to know what this thing is. Like, how did this get this way? Why is it this way? And there are some times where I'm okay if I don't get an answer, because your headcanon is far more enjoyable than anything that, like, we could create answer-wise.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I want to leave. There's going to be sections that I'll just genuinely not have an answer to, because I didn't want to have an answer to it. I wanted it to be mysterious. And if I get an answer to it, then it ruins the mystery for me as well. Like, I'm just like, oh, no, I know too. And, like, at that point, I like just having it as a mystery.
So, on the same note, around the same area, is there any point in the game where the player is going to experience anything like this, right? Like, I know we've talked previously, this is history. This is the history of Terrillian, the backstory with everything. But is there at any point where the gamer actually gets to experience all of this awesome history?
They will get to experience the scars of this history. So when they explore this planet, they explore portions of it in areas that have been, either buried in time or, lost to the general public as far as the rest of the population goes. They will get to experience pieces of this history, which again kind of furthers that.
How do they experience those pieces?
So from a gameplay perspective, your character would walk into like old tombs that have been, forgotten to time. And then as they go through, you would see kind of like almost like hieroglyphic writings on walls, and you would find, because the way the Darthmeric people wrote wasn't on like a simple parchment. It was always on this particular type of tree that they would write, and they would write on the inside of these trees, and that's how their story would be transcribed.
They carved their history. Okay.
But before they even did that, and they only did that after a certain amount of time because of reasons which we'll get into. I don't want to spoil that part, which is really exciting.
Coming up.
But they only did that after fact. For a while, it was all oral. It was all spoken to each other. That was how history was carried on. It was an oral history.
Okay, so while we're on the topic of the Darthmar, I realize there's something we have touched on, but we haven't really gone into. Okay, so we've talked about how Calf is different. He's from the bones, they're from the blood. Do you want to go in any depth on that or explain any reasoning or anything, or are you wanting to leave that kind of open-ended for people to interpret as they may?
I like details.
I know you do.
I want more details. I'm a listener and I want more details.
I'm honestly wanting to keep this one open.
Oh no.
Okay.
It's a secret.
It's a secret.
Why is it a secret?
because it's more fun.
Oh,
But I do want to keep that open-ended. I do want people to kind of hear the story and draw their conclusions from it.
Okay, so just know he's different.
He's different, and there's reasons.
Okay.
But I like for people to get to, if they truly are invested in these characters, I would like for them to get to experience the world without me interjecting my plan for it. I want them to figure that out on their own. As far as their gameplay, I want them to kind of go through the world and kind of piece it together themselves.
are there going to be separate quests, and this is how they can piece things together? Are there going to be epic bosses and everything? You beat a boss, you get a little piece of the puzzle. How is this all going to connect?
It's not going to be like...
I want the end conclusion now.
It's not going to be so cookie cutter in the sense that we have it like, oh, you defeated this dungeon boss, and here is your answer to this question.
Yes.
It's more like you get an item, and that item will have a reference, and then you can, if you've been actually searching through this game, you'll find similar references around, and as you kind of piece it together as the player, you can be like, oh wait, these things are actually all related to one thing, and then from there you can start putting it together. There was an idea we had a long time ago where I made a mechanical being that essentially you would be able to tap it into its history, and you would find these cores that you could plug into it, and it would actually dictate to you what it's seeing at that time, thinking you were someone else, and it would be like responding to you.
So you see through someone else's eyes or through a different perspective?
More like he would speak aloud and you would listen to it, and then from there you can use whatever.
So like R2?
No, he's not gonna
R2?
whistle at you.
Like he's just gonna be like, ah!
We should- that should be
they're
a-
just gonna appear and they're gonna be like, here's a message. What?
No,
That
not
should be
like
a
that.
mod or a cheat, like it sounds like R2.
Okay. Here's a good example. I hope people have listened or watched the movie Treasure Planet.
Yep.
You remember that robot at the very end?
Ben.
Ben.
Yeah.
Yes. There you go. This robotic
Robin
character.
Williams? Wait, who played that?
I think it was Robin.
I don't
I don't-
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, somebody's gotta look that up.
Put it in the
But
comments. Put it in the
whoever
comments.
did play that character. The idea of this robot that remembers bits and pieces, but his
Martin
memory is
Short.
fragmented.
Martin Short.
God
Not even
bless
close.
you, Martin.
Yeah, no, I was close.
Marty
That's
boy.
close.
Yeah. What did you say, Robin Williams?
No, I didn't say that. I said Martin something else.
Yeah. Golly. But yeah, no, the idea of that robot would be what I'm talking about in the sense of he would be able to remember bits and pieces, and you would actually go out and collect memory pieces and give it to him. He would be able to give you pieces of that history.
Oh, he
I'm gonna help further
translates
along.
it or something? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm actually even super glad you brought up Treasure Planet because I think about this a lot when I think about the world of Terrillian, because you have that surprise near the end where he's like, "Where's the treasure? Like, where is it?" And the guy's like, "Oh, it's here, just within this world." And so they've got this like core within the world of Treasure
It's
Planet
just like solid
of Montresor, I believe was the name of it.
something
And
like that.
they could go into it, and that makes me think of Terrillian and a thing that I don't want to spoil that you and I talked about the inside of Terrillian.
Yeah.
And another thing I don't want to spoil, but I want to bring up for like in regards to
Spoil it.
getting
So many
Spoilers. Spoil it.
We've talked a lot about the game itself, but I'm like, I don't want to spoil anything because that is brilliant. But we talked at one point about a side quest character within the Baradin race, I believe it was it.
It's either the Fleece or the Baradics.
I think it was the Braddocks. It was like a collector character.
Yes.
And it's a side quest that you could do, but if you do that side quest, you'll learn a lot about the history and you'll get more context. So like you could play through the main story and not do any of the side quests, and you'll get the story. It'll be a good story with really good characters, but you're not going to necessarily get some of that little flavor text.
You don't get the full experience.
Right. So if you did this one specific side quest, you'd get a lot of references and learn a lot of things, so that at a later point there's a reveal that happens, and it actually completely changes how you look at that reveal.
So wait, so with these references, is it coming back to Terrillian and her fighting the Darthmars and all that good stuff, right? Do you see, is that one reference? Is that multiple references in those battle scenes, right? Or is that something that's just span over time of how you have to actually understand and see, these battles that are happening, these historic battles? Or is that a spoiler or something? I don't know. We've been kind
So
of hitting
just
that.
because there's so much that's upcoming, and Terrillian's story, the planet and the person, they have such a critical role to play coming up, And what they do next is really going to be what we've been alluding to throughout this entire podcast today. What they do next is actually going to kind of help answer a lot of those questions, and it's going to help kind of tie that together as far as the question, like, are we going to get to see some of this, and where are we going to see it? What is that going to look like? Because I do want to give that history to the player, like I said, but I also want to give it to them in a way that allows them not for me to insult their intelligence by me spoon feeding it to them, but allows them to actually immerse themselves into the game in a way where they can go out, search this history themselves, if they're even interested in wanting to hear it. Some players don't. They just want to go over there with a big sword and start whacking people. You know, like, I mean, like, when I played Skyrim, that's all I did. I just got a sledgehammer and I just killed a bunch of people. Like, I didn't even follow the quest line. I was like, who can I hit with this hammer next? Like, that was my goal.
And power up.
Power up this hammer. Like, where's the biggest weapon I can find and just hit people with it?
Yeah.
And how little armor can I wear while doing it? Like, I just wanted to be like this one guy.
Make it more challenging.
Just make it more challenging. It was just, that's what I wanted to do. And then only after I got through this killing frenzy did I actually want to start going to the history. So it's
But it made it that much more of a better experience. Right?
Yeah, because you open the door for both player types. You have the rampaging player who doesn't really care about lore, which is cool. You know, they want to play the game, and I'm fine with that. So you have that door where you're not, you know, shoveling lore into their face like they're trying to fight this guy, and you're like, no, let me tell you about this. Stop what you're doing.
You can't
Stop
skip
that.
it.
You can't skip this.
it.
You need to listen.
Yeah.
Like, that's the worst. Nobody wants it. Like, people hate, what do they call it, tutorial videos, when you're playing a video game and you have to go through that stupid long tutorial video. And you're like, I don't care. Just let me figure it out. Just get me past this, whatever you got to do. Let me just play the game. Cool. I don't want to just spoon feed the history into their face, you know?
Yeah, no, totally get that. Okay, well, is there any other insights you want to provide based on this reading about Terrillian, Darth Mars, right, and this scene, this epic battle that just happened? Anything else you'd like to share with us?
This battle, it is essentially the beginning of the end for the Darth Merrick race. This is what sets the tone for the rest of the story. At this point, after she has been swatted away, this is when Terrillian really starts to show her malice and her vindictiveness. So
because it's constant, it's rage. It's
rage. It's constant fuel. She has lost her love, and both in the metaphorical sense and in the real sense. She killed Kraith, who was her love.
It's like she lost herself, or she killed her. You know, like
she killed that
of
part.
herself, right? Yeah.
She doesn't have that. So all she has left is just the idea of her becoming something she can never be. So it's just a constant rage. So after, you know, she gets swatted away and realizes, oh, there's a threat out there that's, you know, putting me back. This is now where everything in her mind is going to be going towards. So what she does next, which will be in the next episode, but what she does next is going to be building to that. This is the catalyst that sets everything else in motion.
With that, we will draw to a close. We do appreciate all of you who have listened to our comprehensive discussion of the planet known as Terrillian. We entice you to listen and learn, following along with each podcast, so that you will visualize the vivid and vast world of Terrillian. A tragic tale set forth for the main protagonist, where you as the gamer play to conquer lands and legends, thus creating a lore of your own. In doing so, we hope to gain your favor to turn these stories into a video game. If you want to see more content, check out our website at terrilliangaming.com. For more episodes, find us on Spotify and YouTube. Support our emergence.